We may not know each other very well, but the common thread binding us is that of shared life experience. For example, at different times and different contexts in all of our lives, we feel fear. Today, I want to offer my own story, told in 3 chapters, about how I turned fear from an adversary to an ally. Chapter 1. Saturday, February 9th, 2008 is a day I'll never forget. It's the day my father passed away. I was 20 years old and a junior at Tennessee State University. When my family member delivered the news, it hit me like a truck, barreling down the road at full speed. It was jarring. He was there, and then he wasn't. It felt like I had lost my foundation and the ground was shifting beneath me. For the first time in my life up to that point, one of my greatest fears had become a reality. There was already a lot of transition going on in my life. This just added more to an already full plate. My newfound reality and my fears weighed heavily on my heart and my mind. Chapter 2. Losing my father was hard, but I ultimately grew from the experience. I started thinking differently about life. Recognizing the role that health played in my father's life made me much more conscious of my own mortality. I decided to get in shape, lost 50 pounds. I was a senior getting ready to go to graduate school. Life was okay. It was manageable. I'd suffered a huge blow, but I felt like I overcame it. In retrospect, I wasn't really intentional about addressing the newfound fears that my father's passing left me with. I just kept moving to the next thing. After graduation, I went to school at a large university to pursue my master's degree. Being an HBCU graduate, at my academic institution, I'm accustomed to a certain level of community. I didn't feel this in my new home. Being the only Black man in my department, I felt like I experienced a variety of scenarios that was not the norm for others. I did not feel welcome. It was difficult. It made me question my own abilities. Despite my best efforts and 2 years of hard work, I ended up getting kicked out of that program. Once again, for the first time in my life, I'd experienced another first. I had no idea where my professional path was leading. It felt like everything was burning down around me, and there was no salvation in sight. From this point, I hit a real low. I wasn't leaving my room for hours at a time. I was so stressed, I developed a physical tic. And all that weight I lost in the last chapter, that came back, and more. I went from the peak of overcoming adversity deep down into a dark valley full of uncertainty. Chapter 3. I ultimately credit my mother with giving me the motivation I needed to go back to school. She said that I should not let fear dictate my moves in my life. And when I really thought about it, that's exactly what I've been letting happen. In that moment, I said aloud, no more, and I applied to a master's program. Over the course of the next year, while I was working a full-time job, I got my master's of public administration. I used this momentum to apply for my doctorate. For the first 4 programs I applied to, I got rejected. A colleague recommended Virginia Tech. I applied, they invited me down for an interview, and 2 weeks later, I found out I got in. That was big news, right? Even then, in that moment of joy, I still felt fear. This time it came in the form of imposter syndrome. I was scarred from my last experience. I felt like I didn't have the perspective, the knowledge needed to move forward. But when I ultimately thought about it, I recognized that didn't make any sense. The difference this time around is that I had experience. I knew what went wrong last time, and I allowed this knowledge to quiet the fears in my mind. Sometimes we just have to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, you got this. I took that energy and I graduated with my doctorate in 3 years. Following that, my professional, academic, and personal life came full circle, and I was able to find a career in student affairs, which allows me to pour into others. I'm incredibly thankful for that. So you may be wondering why I decided to share this story today. Ultimately, my hope is that you're able to get something from my experience. So here's what I learned about the process of going through fear. Number one, fear is natural. Know that if you're feeling fear is normal and you are justified. Also know that the only way to overcome your fear is to be intentional in facing it. We often fear what we don't know. When you feel fear, dig into why you feel the way you do. Examine it and understand it. Number two, you can't control what comes your way. Podcast host, philanthropist, and former heavyweight boxer Mike Tyson is the author of one of my favorite quotes. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Know that metaphorically, repeatedly, life will punch you in the face. There's no way around it, which leads me to my next point. Number three, be intentional in choosing how you will respond to fear. We can't always choose what comes our way, but we do have the ability to choose what comes next. I chose to use my father's death as motivation to get my own health in order. I chose to learn from my master's program experience going into my doctoral program. Today, I'm choosing to share my experience with you in hopes that you may gain something from it. Choose to understand your fear rather than being conquered by it. By leaning into my own experiences with fear, I was able to stop looking at it as an adversary and begin looking at it as an ally. Fear is often an indicator of true and present danger, but in some cases, it's a construct of the mind. When you feel fear, lean into why you feel the way you do and seek to understand it. Let that knowledge illuminate the dark pathways of uncertainty in your mind. Thank you.